April 4, 1945. A dirt road east of the Weser River. The loader inside a modified M26 Pershing slides a 50-inch shell into the breech. The gun is massive, 21 feet of steel barrel protruding from the turret. Through the periscope, the gunner tracks a shape on the horizon. Range, 1,400 meters. Nearly a mile. Too far for most tank guns of this war. But not this one. The commander's voice crackles through the intercom. Target. Armored vehicle. Traverse right. The crosshairs settle. The gunner exhales. Fire. The recoil rocks the entire tank backward, 44 tons shifting on its suspension. Through the dust and smoke, they wait. 3 seconds. 4. Then, on that distant ridgeline, flame. A German tank, likely a Panther or Tiger, erupts. The crew will never know for certain what they hit, only that it burned. This is the only recorded combat shot from the T26E4 Super Pershing in World War II. 1 shell, 1 kill. At a range that rewrote American expectations. But this moment sits at the end of a longer, stranger story about how the United States trained its tank crews to use ammunition, how doctrine collided with reality, and why the arrival of the 90mm gun changed not just firepower, but psychology. For 3 years, American tankers had learned a simple truth. Get close or die trying. The 75mm gun on the M4 Sherman could penetrate a Panther's glacis at maybe 200 meters. Against a Tiger? Closer still. And only from the side. Crews developed tactics born from desperation. 5 Shermans to 1 Tiger. Advance under covering fire. Flank. Pray the first tank survives long enough for the second to find an angle. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Training reflected this reality. At Fort Knox, gunnery instructors taught crews to close distance aggressively. Fire on the move. Saturate the target. Ammunition was plentiful. Doctrine emphasized volume. A hit at 300 meters was better than a miss at 600. The math was brutal, but clear. American industry could replace shells faster than crews. German tankers learned the opposite lesson. Their 88mm guns on Tigers and the long 75 on Panthers could kill at 1,200, 1,500 meters. They trained for patience. Let the enemy close. 1 shot, 1 kill. Ammunition shortages made every round precious. By 1944, German tank schools drilled crews on ammunition conservation. Fire only when certain. The arrival of the M36 tank destroyer in late 1944 began to shift American thinking. The 90mm M3 gun could finally penetrate Tigers frontally at 1,000 meters. Suddenly, American crews had reached. But old habits persisted. Commanders who had survived in Shermans kept closing distance. The gun could kill at 1,000 meters. Most crews still fired at 400. Ammunition expenditure reports from the 3rd Armored Division in January 1945 tell the story. M36 tank destroyers averaged 14 rounds per kill. M4 Shermans with 76mm guns averaged 18. The numbers suggest not just accuracy problems, but doctrinal confusion. Crews trained to get close were now being told to stand off. The transition was messy. Then came the M26 Pershing. February 1945. 20 tanks arrive in Europe as part of Zebra mission. Crews receive 3 days of training. The message from instructors is direct. This is not a Sherman. The armor holds. The gun kills at range. Change how you fight. But 3 days cannot undo 3 years. Muscle memory runs deep. The first Pershing crews still closed to Sherman distances before firing. 400 meters. 300. Close enough to see faces through the periscope. The famous duel at Cologne on March 6th exemplifies this. A Pershing commanded by Lieutenant Robert Early encounters a Panther at 240 meters. Point-blank range for a 90mm gun. The Panther fires first. The shell strikes the Pershing's glacis and deflects. No penetration. Early's gunner, Sergeant Clarence Smoyer, returns fire immediately. 1 shot. The Panther's turret erupts. The entire engagement lasts seconds. Signal Corps cameras capture it on film. It will become the most watched tank kill of the war. But watch closely. The Pershing could have engaged from 600 meters, 800, perhaps more. Early chose 240. Why? Training. Instinct. The certainty that comes from seeing the target clearly. At longer ranges, identification becomes difficult. Is that hull-down shape a Panther or a Panzer IV, a Tiger or a captured Sherman? Friendly fire haunted every armoured division, better to close and be certain. After-action reports from March and April show Pershing crews, averaging ranges of 400 to 600 metres per engagement. The gun's capability far exceeded its use. Ordnance officers noted this in field memos. Crews are not exploiting the 90mm range advantage. Recommendation: revised training doctrine emphasizing standoff engagements. But there was another factor. The M26 carried 70 rounds, 41 of armor-piercing type M82, 29 high-explosive M71. In sustained combat, 70 rounds disappear quickly. Crews learned to ration, not because shells were scarce, but because resupply in combat zones took time. A tank without ammunition is a pillbox, useless for maneuver. Commanders began emphasizing shot discipline. Make the first round count. This created tension with existing doctrine. American gunnery training since 1942 emphasized rapid fire. The stabilized gun on the Sherman allowed shooting while moving, spray and adjust. The logic was industrial. America could outproduce Germany in shells. Why not use that advantage? Some crews fired 20, 30 rounds in a single engagement. Suppressive fire. Psychological effect. Overwhelming the enemy. The 90mm changed this calculus. Each M82 armor-piercing round weighed nearly 11 kilograms, longer than a man's arm. Loading required strength and coordination. Rate of fire maxed out at about 6 rounds per minute under ideal conditions. In combat, with adrenaline and fear, maybe 4. The gun forced deliberation. You could not simply hose down a target. Every shot mattered. Training officers at the Detroit Tank Arsenal in March 1945 began revising instruction manuals for Pershing crews. New guidance emphasized first round hit probability, range estimation without stabilization at long distance, conservation of armor-piercing rounds, use of high explosive against soft targets to preserve AT rounds. These were German principles, adopted by necessity. Then came the Super Pershing, the T26E4, one tank, an experiment. In January 1945, engineers at Aberdeen Proving Ground mounted the experimental T-15E1 90mm gun on a modified M26 chassis. The gun barrel was 73 calibers long, nearly 6.5 meters. It dwarfed the standard M3. Muzzle velocity with HVAP rounds exceeded 1100 meters per second. Penetration performance rivaled the German Long 88. The tank arrived in Europe in mid-March, assigned to the 3rd Armoured Division. Orders were explicit: engage only at maximum range. Test the gun's capabilities. Do not close unnecessarily. The crew received special briefing. This weapon can kill any German tank at ranges beyond normal engagement distance. Use that advantage. April 4th, east of the Weser River, the Super Pershing encounters German armor on a ridgeline. The commander makes a decision that breaks every pattern learned in 3 years of combat. He does not close. He stops. Takes time. Estimate range, 1,400 meters. He orders the shot. The T-15E1 fires. The shell crosses nearly a mile of German countryside in under 2 seconds. Impact. Detonation. The target burns. The crew will report 1 kill. 1 shell expanded. The ultimate expression of shot discipline. But this engagement will remain an outlier. By the time doctrine could adapt to this capability, the war in Europe was over. American ammunition expenditure in the final months of the war tells a story of transition. M4 Sherman crews continued to average 15 to 20 rounds per tank kill. Old doctrine, old habits. M36 tank destroyer crews, with more training on the 90mm, improved to 12 rounds per kill. M26 Pershing crews, despite shorter combat time, averaged 8 to 10. The gun itself enforced discipline. But waste is the wrong word. American crews expended ammunition for reasons German tankers could not afford. Suppressive fire that pinned enemy infantry, ranging shots that bracketed targets before the killing blow. Psychological effect that broke German morale. A Tiger crew, hearing shells impact around their tank, even without penetration, knew American guns had range now. Doubt crept in. Post-war analysis by the Ordnance Department examined this question directly. Were American tank crews wasteful with 90mm ammunition? The conclusion was nuanced. By German standards of one shot, one kill, yes. By American standards of using industrial advantage to achieve tactical and psychological dominance, no. The goal was not efficiency, the goal was victory. Consider the alternative. German tank crews in the final months, strangled by fuel and ammunition shortages, often abandoned operational tanks after firing their last rounds. American crews never faced this. Resupply might take hours or a day, but it came. This freedom shaped tactics. Fire 10 rounds to guarantee one kill rather than risk missing with one shot when the perfect target appears. The Super Pershing's single combat shot at 1400 meters represents one extreme. Perfect conditions, clear sight lines, a crew specifically trained for long-range engagement, a gun capable of the shot. But warfare rarely provides perfect conditions. Most combat in Germany occurred in villages, forests, rubble. Visibility dropped to 200 meters or less. Range advantage became theoretical. Cologne, Remagen, Paderborn, Dessau. The recorded Pershing engagements cluster at close range not because crews were poorly trained, but because the terrain dictated it. Urban warfare negated every advantage of the 90mm gun except one: penetration at any range. That mattered. A Sherman hitting a Panther at 200 meters from the front often failed to penetrate. A Pershing at the same range punched through every time. By late April 1945, German resistance was collapsing. American armored divisions raced eastward. Tank-on-tank engagements became rare. Most Pershing crews fired more high-explosive rounds at strongpoints than armor-piercing at tanks. The war ended before the full potential of the 90mm gun in open terrain could be explored. Korea changed everything. June 25, 1950. North Korean T-3485 tanks cross the 38th parallel. American forces in the region have M24 Chaffee light tanks, 75mm guns, thin armor. The T-34 seconds crush them. Within days, urgent requests flood back to Tokyo and Washington. Send Pershings. Send anything with a 9mm gun. By August, M26 tanks pulled from storage depots in Japan and Okinawa arrived at Busan. Crews thrown together in days. Many have never seen a Pershing before. Training consists of driving the tank off the transport ship and pointing toward the front. The doctrine developed in the final months of World War II? Largely forgotten. 5 years had passed. New crews. New war. But the gun remembered. The first engagement was near Daegu, on August 17th. Lieutenant William Carter's platoon of 3 Pershings encounters 5 T-34, 85 seconds, at approximately 600 meters. The North Korean tanks advance in line, confidence. They had faced only Chaffees and bazookas until now. Carter's platoon halts, takes positions hull down behind a ridge. The North Koreans close to 400 meters before recognizing the threat. Too late, the Pershings fire, 15 minutes, 5 T-34 seconds destroyed, 0 American losses. The 90mm M3 gun penetrates T-34 armor at any combat range, front, side, rear. The armor-piercing M82 round with its explosive filler ensures catastrophic kills. North Korean crews who survive report they thought they faced new heavy tanks. They had no intelligence about Pershings in theater. Ammunition expenditure in Korea initially mirrored World War II patterns. Early engagements saw Pershing crews firing 8 to 12 rounds per kill, bracketing fire, adjustment, but something changed through autumn 1950. Crews began achieving kills with 3 to 5 rounds, sometimes fewer. What happened? If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The answer lies in what those 5 years of peace had erased. The doctrinal confusion between Sherman-era close combat and Pershing-era standoff capability no longer existed. New crews learned only one way to fight: long-range engagement with the 90mm gun. No muscle memory of closing to 300 meters. No instinct said get closer to be certain. They trusted the gun because they had nothing to compare it against. Field reports from the 1st Cavalry Division in October 1950 note this explicitly. Pershing crews demonstrate better range discipline than anticipated, engaging at 600 to 800 meters consistently. First-round hit probability improved. The gun's capability was finally 2,000 quartered, matching crew doctrine, because the doctrine started with the gun's capability, not despite it. But Korea also revealed the cost of that 1,400-meter Super Pershing shot from April 1945. That engagement had required perfect conditions: flat terrain, clear visibility, a stationary target. Korea's mountains and valleys rarely provided such luxuries. Most engagements occurred at 400 to 600 meters, optimal for the 90mm, but not the extreme range the gun theoretically enabled. There exists a persistent question in armor warfare. If your gun can kill at 1,000 meters, should you always engage at 1,000 meters? The answer reveals itself in logistics. Every meter of distance requires more precise range estimation. Wind becomes a factor. Target movement complicates tracking. And, most critically, ammunition expenditure increases with missed shots. American doctrine in Korea evolved toward a middle path. Engage at the longest range where first-round hit probability remains above 70%. For the M3 90mm gun firing M82 ammunition, that distance was approximately 700 meters against tank-sized targets. Closer, accuracy improved but advantage decreased. Further, missed shots wasted time and ammunition, during which the enemy could maneuver. This represented neither the Sherman-era doctrine of closing to 200 meters nor the Super Pershing extreme of 1,400 meters. It was the practical application of 3 years of Pershing experience distilled into simple guidance. Trust your range, trust your gun. Fire when mathematics favors you. The question of waste returned in different forms. Some Army analysts in 1951 argued Pershing crews were being too conservative. If the gun can kill at 1,000 meters, why accept 700 as standard? The response from frontline commanders was immediate and blunt. Because war is not a firing range. Uncertainty, fear, movement, fog, smoke, terrain. Every factor degrades performance. Doctrine must account for reality, not theory. Captured North Korean documents from late 1950 provide the other perspective. Tank commanders were ordered to avoid engagement with American M26 tanks beyond 500 meters. The T-34's 85mm gun could penetrate Pershing's frontal armor at that range, but accuracy suffered beyond 400. North Korean doctrine adapted to American capability. Stay close. Use mobility. Force close-range fighting where training and numbers might compensate for firepower disadvantage. This created a bizarre dynamic. American crews trained to engage at 700 meters. North Korean crews trained close to 400. Most engagements settled at 500 to 600. The compromise distance where both sides felt capable. Neither doctrine is fully implemented. Both sides fought at the range that balanced capability with confidence. And ammunition? American Pershing crews in Korea averaged 6 rounds per tank, kill through 1950. Better than World War II, but still well above the theoretical minimum of 1. Post-battle analysis revealed why. First shot, ranging. Second shot, adjustment. Third shot, kill. Fourth through sixth shots, insurance. Making certain the target would not return fire, suppressing nearby positions. covering withdrawal. German tankers in World War II would have considered this wasteful. Fire one shot, relocate, preserve ammunition. But German tankers also fought with the constant knowledge that resupply might never come. Fuel might run out tomorrow. Every shot mattered because there might only be 20 shots total. American crews never faced this constraint. Logistics always came through. Eventually, this freedom shaped everything. The Super Pershing itself never saw combat again after that single engagement in April 1945. The T-15E1 gun proved impractical for mass production. Ammunition handling issues. The 50-inch shells were too long for comfortable loading. Fatigue became a factor in sustained firing. The improved T-15E2 version with two-piece ammunition solved some problems, but introduced others. Loading time increased, complexity increased, reliability decreased. By late 1945, ordnance engineers had concluded the standard M3 90mm gun represented the optimal balance for American doctrine. Sufficient penetration against known threats. Manageable ammunition. Reasonable rate of fire. The T-15E1's extreme range capability was unnecessary when most combat occurred at 400 to 600 meters. Better to have 6 reliable rounds per minute than 4 difficult ones. This decision crystallized a principle. Do not design weapons for theoretical maximum range. Design for the range where combat actually occurs. The Super Pershing's 1,400-meter kill was impressive. It was also irrelevant to the war's outcome. That same crew could have killed the target at 800 meters with the standard gun, or 600. The extra range provided no tactical advantage worth the logistical and training cost. Post-war development of the M46 pattern, M47, and M48 continued with 90mm guns of increasing refinement, but none returned to the extreme barrel lengths of the T-15E1. Lesson learned. Practical range trumps theoretical range. Better to hit reliably at 800 meters than possibly hit at 1,500. The question remains, were American crews wasteful with 90mm ammunition? Compared to whom? German crews firing 1 shot per kill operated under constraints American crews never faced. Ammunition scarcity, fuel scarcity. The knowledge that every missed shot might be the difference between life and death tomorrow. American crews operated under abundance. If 6 rounds guaranteed a kill, while 1 round risked a miss, the choice was obvious. Consider mathematics coldly. One M26 Pershing costs approximately $83,000 to produce in 1945. One 90mm M82 armor-piercing round costs approximately $24. If expending 5 extra rounds per engagement reduces the chance of losing the tank from 20% to 5%, the investment is rational. $12,000 in ammunition to protect an $83,000 asset and 5 irreplaceable crew members. But doctrine is not built on spreadsheets. It is built on the collective experience of men who fight. And those men, through late 1944 and all of 1945, learned the 90mm gun gave them something they had never possessed in a Sherman. Options. The option to engage at range. The option to penetrate frontally. The option to kill with the first shot if conditions allowed, or the second, or the third. This psychological advantage manifested in morale reports from armored divisions. Crews in Pershings reported higher confidence than crews in Shermans. Not because the Pershing was invulnerable, it was not, but because they felt the fight was even. A Tiger still held advantages, heavier armor, more powerful gun. But a Pershing crew no longer felt helpless. They could hurt what hurt them. That changed everything. The German perspective appears in interrogation reports from captured tankers. Late March, 1945. A Panther commander taken prisoner near Paderborn. When we learned the Americans had tanks with 90mm guns, we knew the advantage was lost. We could still win individual duels, but the certainty was gone. Before, we knew any hit would kill them. They knew the same. The word appears again and again in German after-action reports from March and April 1945. Not fear, not defeat, doubt. The erosion of the certainty that had sustained, German tank crews since 1942. The knowledge that their armor and gun gave them overwhelming advantage. Pershings did not eliminate that advantage entirely, but they reduced it enough that every engagement became uncertain, and uncertainty is expensive. A Tiger commander who previously advanced confidently to 1,200 meters now hesitated at 800. A Panther crew that once held a position until American tanks closed to 400 meters now withdrew at 600. The psychological effect of the 90mm gun exceeded its ballistic effect. German doctrine had no answer for American abundance meeting German capability. By late April 1945, some German units were abandoning tanks rather than engaging Pershings. Not because the Pershing was unbeatable, several were knocked out in combat, but because the risk-reward calculation had shifted. In a losing war, with fuel scarce and retreat inevitable, why risk your life in a fair fight? Better to save the crew. The tank would be lost eventually anyway. This represented the ultimate success of American material doctrine, not just to match German capability tank for tank, but to deploy that capability in such numbers and with such logistical support that German crews lost the will to fight. The 90mm gun was the instrument. Abundance was the strategy. Waste, by German standards, was the point. One final engagement illustrates this principle perfectly. April 26, 1945, near Paderborn. A platoon of 3 M26 Pershings encounters a King Tiger. The Tiger crew, experienced veterans, takes a hull-down position. Excellent tactical placement. The Pershings halt at 900 meters, too far for guaranteed penetration of the Tiger's frontal armor with standard M82 ammunition. Standard German doctrine. Wait for the Americans to close. American doctrine. Do not close into the Tiger's optimal range. Stalemate. Then the American platoon leader makes a decision. All 3 Pershings open fire, not aimed shots, suppressive fire. 18 rounds in 90 seconds. The Tiger's armor holds, no penetrations, but the psychological effect is devastating. The German crew cannot identify which tank to engage, cannot return accurate fire under constant impacts. After 2 minutes, they abandon the vehicle and withdraw on foot. The Pershing crews expend 18 rounds of 90mm ammunition to achieve 0 penetrations. By any measure of accuracy or efficiency, this is waste. But the Tiger is eliminated from the battlefield without American loss. Mission accomplished. Total ammunition cost, $432. Cost of replacing 1 Pershing, $83,000. The mathematics are overwhelming. This engagement was never recorded in the official armor kill reports. No penetration meant no credit, but it demonstrates how American crews actually used the 90mm gun, not always as a precision instrument, sometimes as a tool of overwhelming firepower, the flexibility to choose between 1 carefully aimed shot or 20 suppressive rounds. German crews rarely had that choice. By 1945, they barely had 20 rounds total. The story of the 90mm gun and American ammunition doctrine does not end with Germany's surrender. It extends through Korea, through the development of the M48 pattern, and ultimately into the questions that shaped Cold War armor doctrine. But the essential lessons were written between February and May 1945 in the combat reports of men who suddenly possessed a weapon that changed the terms of engagement. Lieutenant Robert Early, who commanded the Pershing that killed the Panther at Cologne, gave an interview in 1953. The interviewer asked about ammunition expenditure. "How many rounds did you fire in combat?" Early paused, consulted a worn notebook. "From Cologne to the Elbe, 47 rounds, 31 armor-piercing, 16 high explosives. We were credited with 3 tank kills and 11 positions destroyed." The interviewer pressed. "That's more than 10 rounds per tank kill. Did you feel you were wasteful?" Early's response was immediate. "Wasteful? No. I brought my crew home alive. That's what those rounds bought. Insurance, certainty, peace of mind. Dying because you tried to save ammunition." This perspective, repeated across dozens of crew interviews, reveals the human dimension behind the statistics. Doctrine debates, efficiency. Crews value survival. The debate over ammunition waste in armoured warfare has historical roots deeper than World War II. In World War I, artillery doctrine emphasised mass bombardment, tens of thousands of shells per mile of front. British commanders at the Somme fired over 1.5 million shells in the week-long preparatory bombardment. Efficiency advocates argued this was wasteful. Frontline officers argued it kept men alive. Both were correct. By 1940, tank warfare had evolved toward German principles of precision. One shot, one kill. This was partly tactical wisdom, partly necessity. German industry could not match Allied production. Conservation was survival. But this created a psychological framework where efficiency became virtue. A tanker who killed with one shot was skilled. A tanker who needed 5 was wasteful. American doctrine rejected this framework from industrial logic. If you can produce 5 shells for every one the enemy produces, use all 5. The moral weight of efficiency falls differently when abundance is the baseline. A commander who conserves ammunition while losing tanks is not efficient. He is foolish. The cheapest resource should be expended to preserve the expensive one. The 90mm gun crystallized this philosophy because it finally gave American crews a weapon worthy of abundant ammunition. The 75mm on the Sherman could not penetrate a tiger regardless of how many shells you fired. Abundance was irrelevant when the weapon was inadequate. But a 90mm gun with 70 rounds available? Now abundance became a tactical advantage. Consider the engagement patterns. German tank doctrine in 1944 emphasized ambush. Wait for optimal range, fire one shot, relocate immediately. This doctrine assumed enemy return fire would be inaccurate or ineffective. Against Shermans with 75mm guns, this assumption held. A Tiger could absorb several hits while relocating, but against a Pershing? The first return shot might penetrate. American Pershing doctrine evolved towards suppression and advance. Multiple tanks engage one target. Volume of fire prevents enemy return fire. One tank achieves the killing shot while others suppress. This required abundant ammunition and coordination, but it preserved crews. Loss ratios improved dramatically. In March 1945, Pershings achieved a 5-to-1 kill ratio against German heavy tanks. In April, that improved to 7-to-1. These ratios are deceiving without context. The 5-to-1 ratio does not mean 5 German tanks destroyed for every Pershing lost. It means 5 German tank kills credited versus 1 Pershing combat loss. Many German tanks were abandoned due to fuel or mechanical failure. Many Pershing kills were assists where other weapons contributed. The true picture is messier than statistics suggest, but the trend is undeniable. From February through May 1945, American armored divisions, equipped with Pershings, suffered fewer losses and achieved more kills than divisions still operating Shermans. Some of this was timing fighting occurred in collapsing Germany, where German resistance was fragmenting. Some were training. Pershing crews were often veterans reassigned from Shermans, but much was the gun itself and the doctrine it enabled. Ammunition expenditure tells the story. Sherman units in April 1945 averaged 22 rounds per tank kill. Pershing units averaged 9. Sherman crews still operated under the old doctrine. Close distance, high volume, hope for penetration. Pershing crews had learned the new doctrine. Standoff distance, deliberate fire. Expect penetration. Same American Army. Same industrial base. Different weapons, different doctrine, different results. The question of the 1400-meter Super Pershing kill returns here. That engagement represents the theoretical maximum of what the 90mm gun could achieve under perfect conditions. But warfare provides perfect conditions approximately 0.1% of the time. Doctrine built around theoretical maximum is doctrine built for failure. The genius of American armor doctrine in late 1945 was accepting practical maximums instead. Practical maximum for the M3 90mm gun, 700 meters against moving targets, 1,000 meters against stationary targets, in clear conditions with trained crew. These are the distances where first-round hit probability remains militarily useful. Exceeding these distances provides minimal tactical advantage while significantly increasing ammunition expenditure through missed shots. The Super Pershing's 1,400-meter kill was impressive. It was also unsustainable as doctrine. By 1950, when Pershings deployed to Korea, this understanding was formalized. Field Manual 17-12, Tank Gunnery, published in January 1950, codified the lessons of World War II. Recommended engagement ranges, ammunition conservation principles, fire discipline procedures. The manual specified, do not engage beyond effective range merely because the gun is capable of longer shots. Wasted ammunition is lost opportunity. This represented a middle path, neither the German extreme of one shot only, nor the early American extreme of unlimited suppressive fire. The doctrine acknowledged abundance. American logistics would always provide more ammunition while emphasizing effectiveness. Fire enough rounds to achieve the mission, not one, not unlimited, enough. Korean combat validated this approach. Pershing crews who followed the doctrine achieved kills with 3 to 6 rounds. Crews who reverted to World War II patterns of high-volume fire achieved the same kills with 10 to 15 rounds. Same gun, same enemy. Different applications. The difference was training and discipline. The manual's lessons needed to be learned personally, not just read. There is a deeper question beneath ammunition expenditure. What is a tank crew's primary mission? German doctrine said, destroy enemy armor efficiently. American doctrine said, accomplish the mission while preserving the crew. These are not the same goal. Efficiency is a means, not an end. A crew that dies achieving efficient kills has failed. A crew that survives through inefficient kills has succeeded. This philosophical difference explains ammunition expenditure patterns. German crews conserved ammunition because their doctrine prioritized the tool, the tank, and its limited shells over the users. American crews expended ammunition freely because their doctrine prioritized the users, the irreplaceable trained men, over the replaceable tools. Both approaches are rational under their respective constraints. Neither is universally correct. The mathematics of crew replacement versus ammunition replacement are brutal. Training a tank crew to combat readiness required approximately 6 months in 1945. Cost in facilities, instructors, time, and disruption to other training programs, roughly $12,000 per crew. Cost of 70 rounds of 90mm ammunition, approximately $1,680. A crew that expends every shell in their tank to survive is a bargain. But this calculus assumes survival is possible. Sometimes it is not. Several Pershing crews died in combat despite abundant ammunition. The 90mm gun was not a guarantee, just better odds. A Panther at 200 meters could still kill a Pershing. A Panzerfaust at 50 meters certainly could. Ammunition abundance could not solve every tactical problem. The crews who survived, though, universally credited their ammunition supply. Post-war interviews with Pershing veterans reveal a common theme. We never worried about running out. That freedom changed how we fought. We could engage multiple targets. We could suppress strong points. We could adjust fire without fear of counting rounds. The gun was good. The abundance made it better. By contrast, interviews with German tanker prisoners reveal opposite concerns. We always counted rounds, 20 shells in the tank, maybe another 10 in the exterior bins, if we had not abandoned them for weight. Was a decision. Can we afford to miss? Can we afford not to shoot? The psychological burden of scarcity weighs heavy. One German Tiger commander, captured near Kassel in April 1945, offered a striking observation. Your Pershing is not better than our Tiger. Gun for gun, armor for armor, we match. But you have 60 shells and we have 15. You have fuel for 200 kilometers and we have fuel for 50. You can miss and try again. We cannot miss. That is why you win. This recognition appears in multiple interrogation reports. The weapon platforms were comparable. The industrial backing was not. And that backing manifested most directly in ammunition availability. American crews could afford to be aggressive, even wasteful, because more shells were always coming. German crews had to be miserly, even passive, because more shells might never come. The propaganda value of the 90mm gun exceeded its ballistic value in certain respects. German units that never encountered a Pershing still modified their tactics based on rumors of the 90mm gun. Reports of long-range kills spread through Wehrmacht communication networks. The truth, most kills occurred at 400 to 600 meters, mattered less than perception. American tanks suddenly had reach. This psychological warfare was unintentional but effective. The Super Pershing's 1400-meter kill, though an outlier, was reported and magnified. German tankers began calculating engagement ranges based on worst-case scenarios rather than typical encounters. Doctrine fragmented. Some units attempted to engage at extreme range to prevent American standoff attacks. Others tried to close immediately to negate range advantage. Confusion replaced the confident doctrine that had sustained German armor warfare since 1941. American commanders recognized this effect and exploited it. Orders from 3rd Armored Division in April specifically instructed Pershing crews to engage at maximum practical range whenever terrain allowed. Not because long-range combat was more effective, it often was not, but because visible long-range fire disturbed German decision-making. A Panther crew watching shells land at 800 meters recalculated their odds differently than one ambushed at 300 meters. The final accounting of ammunition expenditure comes from Ordnance Department records compiled in 1946. From February through May 1945, American armored units in Europe fired approximately 2 million rounds of tank ammunition, 75mm, 76mm, and 90mm combined. Approximately 18,000 enemy armored vehicles were destroyed or captured, though many were abandoned rather than killed by fire. 2 million rounds for 18,000 kills suggests roughly 110 rounds per kill. This seems wildly inefficient until you disaggregate the data. Most of those 2 million rounds were high-explosive shells fired at strongpoints, infantry positions, and buildings. Of armor-piercing rounds specifically, approximately 300,000 were fired. That yields approximately 17 rounds per armored kill, still seemingly inefficient. But further disaggregation reveals the pattern. 75mm Shermans averaged 38 rounds per kill. 76mm Shermans averaged 24 rounds per kill. 90mm equipped vehicles, M36 tank destroyers, and M26 Pershings averaged 11 rounds per kill. The better the gun, the fewer rounds required. Not because crews were more skilled, but because penetration was assured. This validates the doctrine. Give crews adequate weapons and they will use ammunition efficiently even under doctrine that permits abundance. The waste was not in Pershing ammunition expenditure. The waste was in equipping the army with Shermans for 3 years, when Pershings could have been available in 1943 with different procurement decisions. That counterfactual has haunted American armor historians for 80 years. If the M26 had reached Europe in mid-1944 instead of early 1945, how many fewer rounds would have been expended? How many fewer tanks lost? How many fewer crews killed? The mathematics are speculative but sobering. Probably tens of thousands of rounds saved, hundreds of tanks preserved, thousands of men are alive. The human cost of delayed procurement cannot be calculated in ammunition statistics, but it can be felt in the accounts of Sherman crews who died at 400 meters from Tiger guns, while the Pershing sat in Aberdeen proving ground undergoing trials. Efficiency has a moral dimension. The most efficient use of ammunition is deploying it in weapons capable of winning. By that measure, every 90mm round fired from a Pershing was efficient. Every 75mm round fired from a Sherman at a Panther it could not penetrate was waste. Lieutenant Clarence Smoyer, the gunner who killed the Panther at Cologne, lived to 99 years old. He gave his final interview in 2018 at 98. The interviewer asked about that famous engagement. Did you ever regret not engaging at longer range? Smoyer's response was characteristic. Regret? No. I hit with the first shot at 240 meters. That's what matters. Could I have hit at 500 meters? Maybe. Could I have missed? Also, maybe. We were trained to be certain. 240 meters is certain. This pragmatism defined American armor doctrine. Theoretical capability mattered less than practical application. The gun could kill at 1,000 meters, crews killed at 400 meters. Both statements are true. Neither contradicts the other. Doctrine must account for human factors, stress, visibility, movement, terrain. Perfect conditions are training ranges, not battlefields. The legacy of the 90mm gun extends beyond World War II and Korea. It established principles that guided American armor development through the Cold War. Adequate penetration at practical ranges, abundant ammunition supply, doctrine that permits aggressive fire, crew survivability as primary objective. These principles shaped the M48, the M60, eventually the M1 Abrams. The 1,400-meter Super Pershing kill remains the longest confirmed tank versus tank kill of World War II using American equipment. It stands as testament to what the 90mm gun could achieve, but it should not overshadow the thousands of kills at 400 to 700 meters that actually won the war. Extreme capability matters less than reliable capability, deployed in overwhelming numbers with unlimited logistics. Were American crews wasteful with 90mm ammunition? By German standards of scarcity, yes. By American standards of abundance, no. Standards of men trying to survive and win? Absolutely not. They used the tools they were given in the manner they were trained, and they achieved victory. Efficiency is measured in outcomes, not inputs. The Pershing crews came home. That is the only efficiency that matters. The story of ammunition expenditure and the 90mm gun cannot be told without understanding what came before. 1942, North Africa. American tank crews encountering German armor for the first time. The lessons learned in the Tunisian desert would shape doctrine for 3 years, and understanding that foundation explains why Pershing crews used ammunition the way they did. February 19, 1943. Kasserine Pass. Elements of the 1st Armored Division engage German forces, including Tiger tanks. The Americans are equipped with M3 Lee and early M4 Sherman tanks, 75mm guns. The engagement is catastrophic. German Tigers engage from 1,500 meters. American rounds bounce off at 800 meters. Crews watch their shells ricochet while German shells penetrate cleanly. Sergeant James Rothwell, gunner in an M4 Sherman, described the experience in his diary. We fired 11 rounds at a Tiger, range maybe 900 yards, every shot hit. We could see the impacts. Sparks and scratches. The Tiger didn't even button up, just sat there. Then it fired once. Our tank to the left exploded. Just gone. We reversed behind a hill and the Tiger didn't pursue, like it was teaching us a lesson. That lesson was brutal. American tanks were outmatched in firepower and armor. Doctrine adapted out of necessity. Do not engage German heavy tanks frontally. Maneuver for side shots. Use numbers. Accept losses. The mathematics were cold. 5 Shermans to kill 1 Tiger was considered acceptable if 3 Shermans survived. Industrial production could replace tanks faster than training could replace experienced crews. But doctrine born from desperation creates habits that persist. By mid-1943, American tank crews had internalized these lessons. German heavy tanks are invulnerable from the front. Close range is suicide but necessary. Fire volume increases hit probability. Maneuver is survival. These were correct lessons for the weapons they possessed. They became incorrect lessons when weapons improved. The 76mm gun introduced on the Sherman in early 1944 provided marginal improvement. Against a Panther's frontal armor, penetration remained uncertain beyond 600 meters. Against a Tiger, maybe 700 meters if you hit the driver's plate precisely. Crews welcomed the upgrade, but doctrine barely changed. Still close, still maneuver, still accept losses. The gun was better, not good enough. This context explains the initial confusion when M36 tank destroyers with 90mm guns arrived in Europe in September 1944. Suddenly, American crews possessed a weapon that could penetrate Tiger frontal armor at 1,000 meters. Doctrine said close to 400 meters. The gun said to engage at 1,000. Crews split the difference and fought at 600. Old habits, better weapons, compromise outcomes. After-action reports from October 1944 show this tension explicitly. 3rd Armoured Division report dated October 22nd. M36 crews are not exploiting the superior range of the 90mm gun. Engagement distances average 500 to 700 meters. Crews report they prefer visual confirmation of target type before firing. Concerns about friendly fire and ammunition conservation cited. Recommend revised training emphasizing standoff engagement. But training takes time, doctrine revision takes longer, and combat does not wait for either. M36 crews continued fighting the way Sherman crews fought, just with better results. The gun compensated for outdated tactics. Penetration was assured at 500 meters. Kills were achieved. Losses decreased. The system worked, even if inefficiently. Then came the Zebra mission, January 1945. 20 M26 Pershing tanks shipped to Europe with explicit orders. Test the design in combat. Evaluate performance against German heavy armor. Determine if mass production is warranted. These were not just tanks, they were mobile proving grounds. Every engagement would be scrutinized. Every round expended would be analyzed. The crews selected for Zebra mission were veterans. Men who had fought in Shermans through France and into Germany. Men who knew the cost of inadequate armor and firepower. The transition training at Stolberg, Germany, lasted 3 days. Mechanics explained the differences. The Ford GAF engine, basically the Sherman's GAA modified for lower profile. The thicker armor, 102mm on the glacis at 46 degrees. The 90mm M3 gun, same as the M36 but in a tank chassis, with better armor protection. Sergeant Clarence Smoyer, assigned as gunner on one of the first Pershings deployed, recalled the briefing. The instructor said, "This tank can take hits that would kill a Sherman. This gun can penetrate anything the Germans have from the front at combat range. Fight differently." That last part stuck with me. Fight differently. But how? We'd been fighting one way for 2 years. The answer came through trial and error. The first Pershing engagement occurred on February 26, 1945, near the town of Elsdorf. An M26, commanded by Lieutenant John Grimball, encountered a Panther at approximately 700 meters. Grimball's after-action report is preserved in 3rd Armored Division records. Identified target as Panther hull down behind debris. Range estimated 700 meters. Conditions are clear. I ordered a halt and engagement. Gunner fired. Impact on upper glacis. No visible effect. Second shot. Impact on turret face. Penetration. Target destroyed. Ammunition expended. 2 rounds. Pershing crews, still cautious from Sherman experience, fired ranging shots before committing shots. The first round confirmed ballistics and impact point. The second round killed. This was more ammunition than theoretically necessary. 1 round should suffice, but fewer than Sherman doctrine demanded. Compromise between old habits and new capability. But ammunition expenditure analysis cannot focus only on successful engagements. The misses matter more. Combat is chaos. Visibility varies. Targets move. Stress degrades performance. Training range accuracy never translates perfectly to battlefield accuracy. Understanding this gap explains why American doctrine permitted high ammunition expenditure. Consider a typical engagement from March 1945. An M26 platoon near Bonn encounters 3 Panthers at varying ranges, 500 meters, 700 meters, 900 meters. The platoon consists of 3 Pershings. Standard doctrine says each Pershing engages 1 target. First Pershing fires at 500 meters. Hit, penetration, target destroyed. 1 round expended. Second, Pershing fires at 700 meters. Miss. Adjustment. Second shot hits but does not penetrate, bad angle. Third shot penetrates. Target destroyed. 3 rounds were expended. Third, Pershing engages at 900 meters. The longest shot. First round misses left. Wind estimation error. Second round misses short. Range estimation error. Third round hits but ricochets struck at too shallow an angle. Fourth round hits and penetrates. Target destroyed. 4 rounds were expended. Total engagement, 8 rounds for 3 kills. By German efficiency standards, wasteful. By American survival standards, acceptable. All 3 Pershings survived. Mission accomplished. This pattern repeated across dozens of engagements. Close-range kills under 500 meters averaged 1.7 rounds per kill. Medium-range kills 500 to 800 meters averaged 3.2 rounds per kill. Long-range kills over 800 meters averaged 5.1 rounds per kill. The data validated doctrine. Engage at the range where hit probability justifies ammunition expenditure. But there was another factor, rarely discussed in official reports but evident in crew accounts. Psychological reassurance. The act of firing, even when a kill was already achieved, provided confirmation. Many crews fired a second or third round into already burning targets, not because they doubted the initial kill, but because certainty mattered. A target might be disabled but still dangerous. Ammunition was cheap, risk was expensive. Lieutenant Robert Early addressed this in a 1946 interview. After Cologne, after that famous Panther kill, we hit 2 more targets that day. Both took multiple rounds. The first Panther burned after 1 hit, but we put 2 more into it. Why? Because I'd seen disabled tanks return fire. Because burning doesn't mean dead. Because my job was bringing my crew home, not conserving ammunition for some bureaucrat's efficiency report. This pragmatic ruthlessness characterized American armor doctrine. Overkill was not waste. It was insurance, and insurance made sense when ammunition was abundant. The 90mm rounds were never scarce. Resupply arrived daily. Depot stocks were measured in thousands. The constraint was not ammunition availability, but crew fatigue in loading and gun barrel wear from excessive firing. Barrel wear became a real concern by April 1945. The M3 90mm gun was rated for approximately 300 effective full-charge rounds before accuracy degraded noticeably. Some Pershing crews in heavy combat exceeded this number. Ordnance officers inspected barrels and found rifling wear consistent with 400 to 500 rounds fired. These guns were still functional, but no longer met accuracy specifications. The solution was simple: replace barrels. Depot-level maintenance could swap a barrel in approximately 8 hours, but this required pulling the tank from combat operations. Commanders faced a choice: keep a less accurate gun in the fight or reduce combat strength temporarily for maintenance. Most chose to keep fighting. Accuracy degradation at 500 meters was minimal. Crews compensated by closing range slightly. The war was ending. Perfect accuracy mattered less than constant pressure. This decision reflected operational priorities. Strategic situation in April 1945 was collapse of German resistance. Speed of advance mattered more than efficiency of ammunition use. Armored divisions raced to cut off retreating German forces. Tank versus tank engagements became rare. Most targets were strongpoints, roadblocks, and infantry positions. High explosive shells, not armor-piercing, dominated expenditure. A detailed analysis of ammunition expenditure from 3rd Armored Division for April 1945 shows this shift. Total 90mm rounds fired, approximately 12,400. Armor-piercing M82, 2,100. High explosive M71, 10,300. The ratio is striking. For every armor-piercing round fired at armored targets, nearly 5 high-explosive rounds were fired at soft targets. This reflects the reality of mechanized warfare. Tanks spend most of their time fighting things that are not tanks: infantry, machine gun nests, anti-tank gun positions, buildings, fortifications. The 90mm high-explosive shell was devastatingly effective against these targets. 10.6 kilograms of shell with 680 grams of explosive, sufficient to demolish a reinforced building corner or suppress an anti-tank gun crew with near misses. Ammunition expenditure against these targets followed different logic. Volume of fire mattered because suppression mattered. A Pershing engaging an anti-tank gun position might fire 10 high-explosive rounds. Not to destroy the gun, one direct hit would suffice, but to force the crew to take cover, disrupting their ability to engage American infantry. 10 rounds costing $240 to save one infantryman's life. Obvious choice. This is why aggregate ammunition expenditure statistics mislead. Saying American crews fired 11 rounds per kill obscures what they were shooting at. Against armored targets specifically, the number was closer to 6 rounds. Against soft targets, the number was higher but for deliberate tactical reasons. Mixing these categories produces a meaningless average. Breaking down the data further reveals patterns by crew experience. Veteran crews, those with 6 or more months of combat, averaged 4.8 rounds per armored kill. New crews, those with less than 2 months, averaged 8.9 rounds per armored kill. Experience mattered enormously. Not because veterans were better shots, though they were, but because veterans made better tactical decisions about when to shoot. A veteran crew recognized when targets were already destroyed, when additional rounds were necessary, when suppressive fire served purpose, when conserving ammunition for later engagement was wiser. New crews, understandably, erred toward over-engagement. Fire more rounds. Be certain. Accept the ammunition cost. This was correct decision-making for inexperienced crews. Better to waste ammunition than hesitate and die. Training tried to accelerate this learning curve. By March 1945, gunnery training at Fort Knox incorporated lessons from Europe. Instructors emphasized, first round hit probability is your most important statistic. If you miss the first shot, you'll likely fire 3 more. If you hit the first shot, you'll likely need only 1 more for confirmation. Practice until first round accuracy is instinctive. But training range conditions never matched combat conditions. Stationary targets, clear weather, no incoming fire, no stress, no fear. Training developed muscle memory and basic skills. Combat developed judgment. The gap between the two explained why even well-trained crews expended more ammunition in combat than in training. Combat introduced variables training could not replicate. One variable rarely discussed: smoke. Battlefield conditions in Germany during spring 1945 involved constant smoke, artillery fire, burning vehicles, smoke grenades, buildings on fire. Visibility frequently dropped below 300 meters. Long-range engagement became impossible. Even medium-range engagement required patience, waiting for smoke to clear enough to identify targets. Pershing crews adapted by increasing ammunition expenditure per engagement, fire through smoke at suspected positions, use tracers to walk rounds onto the target. Accept that many rounds would miss because you cannot see clearly. This was tactically sound even though inefficient. The alternative, waiting for perfect visibility, allowed enemy forces to reposition or escape. Speed mattered more than efficiency. After-action reports from the Ruhr Pocket campaign in April show this clearly. 4th Armoured Division reported, visibility consistently poor due to industrial smoke and fires. Average engagement range decreased to 350 meters. Ammunition expenditure increased 32% compared to March. However, mission success rate remained constant. Assessment. Increased ammunition expenditure is appropriate tactical response to degraded visibility conditions. This adaptive doctrine, adjust ammunition expenditure based on conditions, represented a mature understanding of mechanized autonomous warfare. There was no universal correct number of rounds per kill. The correct number depended on range, visibility, crew experience, target type, tactical situation, and ammunition availability. Rigid efficiency standards would have been tactically foolish. German doctrine, by contrast, struggled with this flexibility. Constrained by ammunition scarcity, German crews could not adapt expenditure to conditions. Whether visibility was perfect or terrible, they had the same 15 rounds. This forced conservative tactics: wait for perfect shots, disengage if conditions are poor, preserve ammunition above all. These were rational responses to scarcity, but tactically limiting. The psychological burden of this constraint appears in German prisoner interrogations. A Panther commander captured near Leipzig in April. We would see American tanks at 600 meters in smoke. We could not identify if they were Shermans or Pershings. We could not waste shells finding out, so we waited. Usually they advanced to 300 meters before smoke cleared. Now they see us. Now we fight at their preferred range. We lost the advantage because we could not afford to shoot blind. American crews faced no such constraint. Uncertain target identification. Fire a ranging shot. Smoke obscures aim. Fire multiple rounds to bracket the target. Suspected position but not confirmed. Suppressive fire to force a response. These tactics consumed ammunition, but provided tactical flexibility that won engagements. Industrial capacity translating directly to battlefield success. By late April 1945, German ammunition shortages became critical. Units reported having 5 to 10 rounds per tank, some had fewer. Doctrine collapsed into desperation. Orders instructed crews to engage only at point-blank range where hits were certain. Ambush tactics only. No maneuvering engagement. These were not tactical choices. They were necessity born from having no ammunition to spare. American intelligence recognized this. Two reports from late April noted. German tank units increasingly passive, avoiding engagement unless cornered. Assessment. Ammunition scarcity limits operational capability more than fuel scarcity or mechanical breakdown. Even operational tanks with fuel are combat ineffective without ammunition. The war was being won, not tank against tank, but logistics system against logistics system. The Pershing's role in this final phase was psychological as much as material. German commanders knew American tanks now possessed 9mm guns with adequate penetration. They did not know which American tanks. A column of Shermans might include Pershings. Better to avoid engagement entirely. This paralysis of uncertainty was strategic victory achieved through selective deployment and reputation management. Only 53 Pershings saw combat in Europe. Fewer than 2% of American tanks in theatre. But their impact exceeded their numbers because perception spread faster than reality. German units that never encountered a Pershing still modified tactics based on possibility. This is efficiency of a different kind. Small deployment, outsized effect. The mathematics of deployment strategy explain this. 53 Pershings could not be everywhere, but they could be somewhere, concentrating them in key sectors. The Remagen bridgehead, the Ruhr pocket, the drive toward Leipzig maximized psychological impact. German intelligence noted Pershing presence in these sectors. German commanders assumed Pershings were everywhere. Doctrine changed army-wide based on localized deployments. This strategy required confidence in logistics. Concentrating Pershings meant lengthening supply lines for their specialized ammunition. The 90mm rounds were not interchangeable with 75mm or 76mm Sherman ammunition. Separate supply chain required. But American logistics handled this complexity easily. Ammunition arrived where needed, when needed. German logistics could barely supply basic rations to frontline units. The contrast became most visible in the final weeks of the war. American armored divisions advancing east reported encountering abandoned German tanks, not disabled by combat, not out of fuel, simply abandoned because crews had no ammunition. Operational tanks rendered useless by logistic failure. These were counted as kills in American reports but represented a different kind of victory. Lieutenant Charles MacDonald, infantry officer attached to 3rd Armored Division, described finding an abandoned Panther in late April. The tank was pristine, no battle damage. Engine started when we tried. Fuel tank half full, but the ammunition racks were empty, completely empty. The crew had left a note in German. Our translator said it was something like, "To the Americans, this fine machine is yours. We have nothing to feed it." Dark humor, but telling. American crews never faced this situation. Even in the heaviest combat, ammunition resupply arrived within 24 hours, sometimes sooner. The logistics train extending from American factories across the Atlantic and through Europe functioned, with remarkable reliability. This invisible backbone made every tactical decision possible. Crews could afford to fire 10 rounds at uncertain targets because 20 would arrive tomorrow. The post-war analysis attempted to quantify this advantage. How much did abundant ammunition contribute to victory versus superior tactics, better training, or technological edge? The answer was impossible to isolate precisely but clearly significant. American crews fought with freedom that German crews envied. Freedom from constant calculation, freedom to miss and try again, freedom to suppress rather than only kill, freedom purchased by industrial might. One final dimension of ammunition expenditure deserves examination. Training ammunition versus combat ammunition. The rounds fired in training vastly exceeded rounds fired in combat. Fort Knox gunnery ranges in 1944 consumed approximately 200,000 rounds of 75mm and 76mm ammunition, training tank crews. That training enabled the combat effectiveness that achieved kills with fewer rounds in actual battle. This investment paid dividends. Crews who fired 500 training rounds before combat needed fewer combat rounds to achieve kills. The expenditure shifted from battlefield to training range, but total expenditure increased. American doctrine accepted this trade-off. Train extensively with real ammunition. Build muscle memory and confidence. Accept the cost. The alternative minimal training to conserve ammunition produced crews who required more combat rounds and suffered higher losses. German training by 1944 faced catastrophic ammunition shortages. New crews received minimal live-fire training. Some crews deployed to combat having fired fewer than 20 rounds total in training. They learned on the battlefield, expending precious combat ammunition for training purposes. This inefficiency born from scarcity cost lives and missions. American training doctrine could afford profligacy because the ammunition would be replaced. German training doctrine faced impossible choices: train crews properly and deplete combat stocks, or send untrained crews to combat and hope experience taught fast enough. Neither choice was good. Scarcity allowed no good choices. The Pershing crews of Zebra Mission benefited from this training investment. Most had fired hundreds of rounds in Shermans before transitioning to Pershings. The 3-day conversion training added 70 to 100 rounds of 90mm live fire per crew. When they entered combat, they were not learning basic gunnery. They were applying familiar skills with a better weapon. Their relatively low ammunition expenditure per kill reflected this preparation. By contrast, Pershing crews deployed to Korea in 1950 received minimal training. 5 years of peacetime had reduced training budgets. Crews arrived with theoretical knowledge but limited, live fire experience. Their initial ammunition expenditure per kill was higher than World War II Pershing crews. As they gained experience through combat, expenditure decreased. The pattern validated the importance of training investment. The cycle was clear. Adequate training with abundant ammunition produces crews who use combat ammunition efficiently. Inadequate training produces crews who waste combat ammunition, learning basic skills. The upfront investment in training ammunition pays off in reduced combat ammunition needs and higher survival rates. American doctrine understood this. German necessity prevented it. This broader perspective reframes the question of waste. Were American tank crews wasteful with 90mm ammunition? Not if you include training ammunition in the calculation. Not if you consider alternative costs of inadequate training. Not if you measure efficiency in crew survival rather than rounds per kill. The expenditure was investment, not waste. The legacy of the 90mm gun extends beyond its ballistic performance. It represented a philosophy of warfare. Provide troops with adequate tools, support them with unlimited logistics, train them extensively, then trust them to use resources appropriately for mission accomplishment and survival. This philosophy won the war, not just in tank combat, but in every domain where American industrial capacity enabled tactical freedom. The 1400-meter Super Pershing kill remains an outlier, one shot in one engagement under perfect conditions. But it symbolizes what the 90mm gun represented: potential. The potential to engage at range, the potential to penetrate any armor, the potential to change tactical dynamics. Most of that potential was never fully realized because the war ended too soon, but the glimpse was enough to shape post-war development. The M46 M47, M48, and M60 tanks all carried 90mm guns or their direct descendants. The lessons of 1945 echoed through 3 decades of American armor development. Adequate gun, heavy armor, reliable logistics, abundant ammunition, doctrine that trusted crews to expend resources appropriately. These principles created the armored force that faced down the Soviet threat through the Cold War. Were those Cold War crews more efficient with ammunition than their World War II predecessors? The data suggests yes, but for a specific reason. Training improved, technology improved, but the doctrine remained the same. Fire enough rounds to accomplish the mission and survive. Not one, not unlimited. Enough. That doctrine, forged in the final months of World War II with the 90mm gun, proved enduring.